Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
8:06. O'Connor and Company fired up here for our fourth hour. If you missed anything, and then you got to check out what Joe DeGeneva had to say about the Hunter Biden pardon, as well as his take on the confirmation process for Kash Patel for FBI director. If you missed that interview at 7 o'clock, please subscribe to and download that podcast so you're always up to speed. And you'll hear all of the fabulous musings of Julie Gunlock all morning long here on O'Connor and Company. Good morning, Julie. Joining us right now is John Solomon from Just the News. John, I don't know, he gave his word as a Biden, and usually that's rock solid, but Joe Biden now announces on a Friday. So a lot of questions here. First of all, do you have any insight as to why this came now? I think everybody in the world knew he was going to pardon Hunter Biden, but I expected it to be the morning of the nomination as he was leaving the White House, sort of out the door. Why now?
Well, maybe family got together over the Thanksgiving holiday. Obviously, Winston Strawn, Hunter Biden's law firm, put out a memo really pushing hard for it, and I think rather than let it linger, the president on Saturday seemed to make an inquiry to the Justice Department, and by Sunday issue the pardon. It does seem to be something that happened quickly. I think you're right. I think it was always going to happen, and I think when history looks back at Joe Biden's presidency, they're going to say that at the beginning of the presidency, he lied about all the aspects of the family scandal. He told people that the laptop was Russian disinformation. It wasn't. He said his family never got money from China. It did. He said that he never met with Hunter Biden's business partners as part of the deal. He did. So he lied at the beginning to cover for this, and at the end, he broke his word. He broke his pledge, something he repeatedly said he wouldn't do, and he'd issued a pardon. And I think the Biden family truthfulness will be the legacy that history will look back. A president who couldn't tell the truth on this from start to finish.
Curious on the timing that he didn't wait until the last minute. I mean, he's still got a few weeks in his presidency. Is this sort of a big middle finger to the Democrats who are going to have to spend the next couple weeks defending this and making excuses for this? And I mean, also look at the timeline. This pardon goes back to 2014. So it doesn't just cover the gun charges. This covers everything. Yeah, but again, that timing is, again, doing it so early. Why is that?
Well, we know from the documents that the IRS whistleblowers and others provided to Congress that Hunter Biden didn't pay his taxes on Burisma money. He was never charged with that crime because the statute allegedly was had already expired on it. But some of the original monies that he got from Burisma in Ukraine, which was the big origins of this investigation, the origins of this scandal, he didn't pay taxes on. So going back to that and making sure that a conspiracy case couldn't be brought against him again in a future Trump Justice Department was probably part of the calculation by the president, by the president's lawyers. But it is something that is irrefutable. That the body of evidence is he didn't pay the taxes, and he didn't pay the taxes on the one part of the investigation that really started the whole scandal. The disbelief that he would go work for a crooked Ukrainian oil company, and so. Yeah. I think the president was making sure that nothing could go backwards in history in a future Justice Department.
John, journalists like you and your colleagues at the New York Post and some other right-of-center outlets who have been investigating Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and the Biden family corruption, we've been called conspiracy theorists, we've been called liars, we've been called, Russian assets, and we're pushing Russian propaganda. This pardon does validate all of that reporting. Otherwise, it wouldn't have to be so broad. It wouldn't have to go all the way back to 2014. So I'm just curious, have you gotten your apology yet?
No. What I got was a fresh smear from Hunter Biden's lawyers who 10 times mentioned me in their report this week. And again, none of it true. They tried to conjure up this notion of how I got the stories, that somehow this guy, Lev Parnas and Rudy Giuliani, were feeding me information. The truth of the matter is, as I have said publicly before, and as I proved to the United States Justice Department in an investigation back in 2021, 2022, I got my information from federal law enforcement way before I even met Lev Parnas or Rudy Giuliani on this matter, and I followed those leads. And what does that tell you? It tells you that federal law enforcement thought as early as December of 18, that's when I got my original information, December 2018, that Hunter Biden was skating, that he was being protected, that he wasn't being investigated like other players who had potentially engaged in crime. And so, but no, there'll be no apologies coming. But you know what? History will have a much harsher light on the Bidens than it will on any of us conspiracy theorists.
This also connects back to the impeachment of Donald Trump, though, doesn't it? Because that reporting also inspired Donald Trump to reach out to then President Zelensky of Ukraine, saying, listen, we're sending you a ton of U.S. money. Looks like there's a lot of corruption there. It might even reach into the highest levels of the U.S. government with our former vice president. Get some investigations going there, or you're not going to keep getting U.S. money. That turned into the impeachment. There's some validation there, isn't there, at the least?
There is. And also I think it's worth going back, and I've had conversations with members of Congress recently. Some of the testimony in the impeachment trial and the impeachment proceedings in the House, it turned out not to be true. And I think that's very important for history to go back and understand that the case that was brought against the president was based on false facts, false testimony, false things. I'll remind everybody, about a year and a half ago, I got a document from the State Department. I fought 4.5 years to get it. But in it, George Kent, the guy who wore the bow tie during the impeachment proceedings from the State Department, wrote a classified letter to his boss, Marie Yovanovitch, another witness in the trial and a former ambassador to Kiev from the United States. And in it, she said someone should tell the vice president that his son undercut our anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine. Why is that so important? If you remember the case that the Democrats put on in Congress, they claimed that Hunter Biden had no impact on Russia policy. In fact, by the number 2 official in the embassy, it had a profound effect. It undercut the anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine. Such an important thing to go back and look at what we were told in 19 during official proceedings of Congress and what the actual truth was.
John, I'd love to pivot over to Kash Patel and get your thoughts on him. It's very interesting watching the left panic about this nomination and suggest that he isn't qualified. I'd love to get your reaction, and also, that Kash Patel is qualified for this position, but give us your thoughts.
Well, let's look at his resume. I mean, he started as a federal public defender, then he was a national security prosecutor. He worked on both sides of the judicial system. He was the chief counsel of the House Intelligence Committee when it unraveled the bogus Russia collusion story, which, by the way, meant overcoming incredible forces inside the CIA and the FBI to get the truth out. He then became a National Security Council counterterrorism director, helped oversee the drone strike against General Soleimani, the Iranian terrorist, and then he became the chief of staff at the Pentagon, where he tried to get troops to go to the Capitol 2 or 3 days in advance to be safe, as the president had ordered to ensure safety. But, of course, his bosses didn't follow through on that, even though Trump gave the order. This is a man who has lots of experience. He's had lots of success. Most importantly, he knows where the bodies are buried. He understands the culture that infected the FBI. And I think that's what scares the Democrats. That's what scares some of the leadership of the FBI. He's not going to buy some of the bogus stories that have been inflicted on America to let the FBI keep doing what it's been doing.
John, real fast, Donald Trump seemed to have taken his time on this one, and there was obviously a deliberative process before officially announcing this weekend that it would be Kash Patel for FBI director. Does this mean that he's taken temperature of some of the senators and he's ensured that it's going to be, the cause will be taken up and will be championed by key senators, and that this will be confirmed?
Yes, listen, even as over the weekend he was meeting with senators under the Judiciary Committee, at least one of them. He's been in contact. They've been taking the temperature, understanding where the heads are, what the questions are, what the Democrat counterattacks might be on both Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, and orchestrating. And I think that's a sign of how much Donald Trump has learned the game in Washington so that he can get through the process and have the sort of people he wants leading his agencies. And I think that maturation is going to play well for most of these confirmation hearings.
John, can you stay with us? We got some more. Since you were sort of in the center of a lot of the things that revolved around Hunter Biden, we'd love to pick your brain a bit more on that story. Great. John Solomon stays with us. First, though, it's 8:15.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
John Solomon continues. And again, both of these top stories here, you're sort of entrenched in, if I could. Here you're just trying to, follow the facts and report news, and suddenly you end up being part of the problem. John Solomon, according to the left and the propagandists in this town. Let's tie up the Kash Patel question first. One thing that he'd like to get to the bottom of, should he become FBI director, is some of the decision-making that happened over the course of the last several years, including the Mar-a-Lago raid on the president's possession of documents from his presidency. And you had some sort of knowledge of that going in. Do you know exactly what went into that decision for the Mar-a-Lago raid and whether that was a Christopher Wray decision or a Merrick Garland decision? And again, this, I guess, relatively open question still as to whether there was anything wrong with Donald Trump having those records.
Yeah, listen, I think if there are going to be hearings into that, if they're going to dig into the bottom, they will learn that there were some senior FBI officials who did not believe it was necessary to raid Mar-a-Lago. They were overruled. Those officials most likely were in the Washington field office here in Washington, which typically handled cases like this, sensitive document cases involving former presidents, former elected leaders. And so the case in the raid was shifted to Florida, into the Florida FBI. I think there's going to be some pretty, if people get to the bottom, and that's a big if, but if they continue to dig in, they'll find out that there was not unanimity in that decision to do that, but of course, which was one of the greatest examples of the sort of just how far the Justice Department might be willing to go to pursue Donald Trump. And so I do think that will be it. And I think part of the reason Kash Patel is interested in getting into the bottom of it isn't just for the political spectacle of it, if it isn't for just the, oh my God, we told you so. It's to understand the cultural thinking that caused the FBI to take decisions that it would, in earlier generations, not take. How did politics get involved? How did traditional Catholics and parents and a former president get to be viewed as potential national security threats? What sort of political indoctrination happened? What sort of people were promoted that made bad decisions? I think he wants to understand the cultural and I think the leadership issues that led to these big decisions so he can fix them. And I think that's a very big part of the mission.
John Solomon is our guest. He's the proprietor of Just the News, justthenews.com. Back over to the Hunter Biden story now. You've already noted that this pardon, which is incredibly... has there ever been a more expansive pardon for an individual over crimes, potential crimes, accused or not, stretching back, what are we talking, 10 years now, right? From January 25th. Have we ever heard of a pardon like this before?
Listen, a lot of pardons go back in a long time. They wipe out all federal crime up to and including the period of time of the day the pardon is. So they tend to be backwards and sweeping in their nature. The president seemed to go out of his way to identify just how far back and what most concerned him in this thing, which is the 2014 transactions. I think that's, something I've been writing about a lot over the last few years because it's clear that he didn't pay taxes on a certain amount of the Burisma money. That is really embarrassing to the Biden family. So it makes sure that can't be gone back to from a federal prosecution standpoint.
And but we shouldn't read too far into the fact that it also goes through yesterday,
No.
which includes the last 3 years and 10 months of the Biden presidency.
Listen, I think when you look at the president's statement, he said he struggled with it. I'm not sure that he did, but the fact that he put that in there tells you that he understood that this was going to be controversial and that he wanted some time for the American public. Excuse me, a little cold going on.
No
there.
problem.
He wanted some time for the American public where he could debate them and try to change their mind before he left office rather than dump it on the 20th. And I think that's what's going on here, a long PR campaign to try to push back on this narrative before he leaves office and he becomes less relevant.
Well, great reporting as always, John, and we're gonna let you go here as you choke to death. It appears, and I mean, you're in our thoughts and prayers, but we just don't want our listeners to have to deal with it. I'll be honest with you. But
Thank you.
no, great,
So mean.
great reporting as always, and thank you for
guys.
persevering through all of the things that have been said
Yes.
about you and your work, because he has. I mean, John's been one of the people who have
Yes.
been all over this. It is noteworthy, I think, when you look back, when you look at this. You mentioned it, and I want to reiterate: Democrats do own this now. I haven't seen many Democrats, except for Joe and Mika and the Democrats who are not holding elected office. But have you seen any elected official step up and say, "Oh yeah, this is fine. This is a good thing"?
No,
they all have
They're
to
all
own
silent.
it now.
Yeah, they have to own it, and also what we are going to see is silence from Obama. Obama still has a house at Colorama. It is regularly people from the Biden administration and the old Obama administration are regularly in and out of that house. And many people have said that the Biden administration was the third term of Obama.
Yeah.
And so he has questions to answer. Now, of course, the mainstream media will not ask Obama any questions. But this, to me, is what's interesting in this is because this goes back to 2014. That is the Obama administration. And
Right.
Obama has some questions to answer here.
Do you think this was part of the deal to get him off the ticket? Joe, step aside. Time for Kamala. You're going to lose to Trump, but you can pardon Hunter. No
Yeah.
questions asked.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
Probably, too. And that's why they're probably going to have
No, Larry, this is just the love of a man for his troubled son.
Yes.
Don't
That's
forget
right.
that,
I
Larry.
keep forgetting
Gosh,
about
we're getting
that.
off track here.
Thank you. You're right. You're right. He's just a little boy and he needs protection.